That was Mahdi Nazem-Roya with the Center for Research on Globalization, giving us an account from the ground, very different from what you are seeing on the U.S. mainstream media. So just what else is missing from those headlines? Well, here in the studio with me is former CIA asset Susan Lindauer, who has been in regular contact with people on the ground there. Thank you for joining us. So obviously, the U.S. mainstream media, as I showed, is playing this up as victory, as celebration. What is missing from those headlines based on your accounts of people on the ground there?
The people of Libya are missing. Last night I received an email from Tripoli saying that there was blood in the streets. NATO helicopters, Apache helicopters, were strafing civilians who were trying to run for cover, chasing people through the streets to get them out of the way. And 1,300 died. I heard 5,000 had been severely injured. The hospitals were overflowing. Yes, 5,000 severely injured. The hospitals were overflowing and could not handle any more people. They were sending them home to their families. Today, this morning, I was told I had a friend who rented a bicycle and rode around the streets of Tripoli, excuse me. And he said the streets were empty. There was no celebrations. He said it was eerie that no one was there. No one was anywhere on the streets.
So then let me ask you what your analysis is then of these pictures. Can we play the images today that everybody's showing of rebel supporters cheering in Green Square? Because these are the images that we keep seeing on television. So what are you saying, Susan?
What I'm saying is that the rebels have concentrated themselves in one very small part of the city. Outside of that square, there are no people. People are not out on the streets supporting them.
But what does that mean? What does that say to you then?
What my friend told me was that they were bussing in the rebels and that they saw trucks heading for this square. And that the people are watching. What my friend said was that the people suspect that Gaddafi is not finished with this. They think, and this is speculation, they're on the ground, they're waiting to see what Gaddafi is going to do. And so they don't really know either. But they're speculating that Gaddafi is waiting for all the rebels to come in and that Gaddafi is regrouping. And once the rebels are all in the city, NATO will not be able to use its air power to defend them, and then Gaddafi's forces will strike. Again, this is gossip, this is speculation, but it is what the people of Tripoli are saying.
So gossip from people that you talk to in Tripoli, that you've been talking to today.
But the people in Tripoli who I've been talking to have excellent contacts throughout the society, and they know families and shopkeepers, and there's been an eerie calm. No one is on the streets. So
except
this is a lie.
Green Square.
Except in Green Square.
I want to show you Green Square a week ago, because there, a week ago, if we could run those pictures, it was a different scene. It was Gaddafi supporters waving that flag. So this was just a week ago, totally different crowd. So the question I have is about NATO's involvement. Has NATO been involved in what essentially has been a civil war since the beginning and taking sides in that?
Oh, absolutely. And NATO has engaged in gross war crimes. NATO bombed the power plants of Tripoli. NATO bombed the water pipeline that feeds the desert and feeds irrigation and the population. NATO has damaged the infrastructure of the community. There's a real question now as to who's going to pay for that. Will it be the people of France and Italy, or will the people of Libya be forced to pay for their own rebuilding their own city that NATO has destroyed?
Well, that's a good question. I want to ask what role you think we'll see NATO and especially the U.S. play now. I want to show a little bit of a quote from the president of the Council on Foreign Relations editorial today in the Financial Times. He said this. He said, and mind you, this was titled, "Libya Now Needs Boots on the Ground." And he said some sort of international assistance, most likely an international force, is likely to be needed for some time to restore and maintain order. Are we going to see some kind of nation building now from the U.S. and NATO?
It would be an absolute catastrophe for the United States and NATO to send ground forces into Tripoli. If you have any hope, if NATO has any hope that this is going to succeed, we have got to step back and let the Libyan people do this themselves. They hate outsiders. Above all, they hate NATO. They're very angry.
Who do you mean when you say they? Because
the ordinary
the
people.
conventional wisdom would be that the rebels have used NATO for their support. So who do you mean when you say they hate?
I mean the ordinary people of Libya who have been bombed for months. There have been human beings on the receiving end of those bombs, and NATO cannot now go in and pretend that it's the good guys. They are all NATO governments. Britain, France, and Italy are always going to be remembered for the damage they have caused to this country, and they're not going to they're not going to be appreciated in the future. Already.
So then, what does this mean for oil? Because Libya is looked to for 1.6 million barrels of oil a day, which has gone offline during this 6-month conflict. And you already have the Italian foreign minister sending workers in. And there are a lot of questions about where this oil will go and what will happen with contracts.
Well, you see, this is a very interesting question because the NATO rebels want to say that the people are going to support them in whatever they do. The facts are that they're not going to support them. Just because you arrive in a town and you shoot it up doesn't mean that the people automatically are going to back your policies. And NATO rebels would do better, in fact, to put the NATO governments at a distance now and put the people first. But of course, NATO is not going to allow that to happen. But it would be a disaster if they put boots on the ground. It would guarantee that this would become Iraq.
And given
it would become Iraq.
And given that the United States has been embroiled in Iraq and Afghanistan, still a decade-long, nearly, conflict in Afghanistan, and is now in $14.6 trillion of debt, trying to figure out how it's going to start to chip away at that, how does Libya, on top of that, bode for the U.S.?
I think that NATO governments have done a terrible disservice to Obama. I think that Obama has lost the anti-war community and that the vote of the anti-war community, and I think that that he will lose the rest of the independent voters if he goes into it creates another Iraqi situation, which this would become. There is no doubt in my mind the people of Libya do not like outsiders. They do not appreciate it that we have interfered in their city. They're going to handle this as they choose. And now they're going to have to settle their scores. This is a tribal society. They have vendettas. Those tribes will systematically kill each other off back and forth now until they have achieved justice. But I do not think that this fight is over. It may be over from NATO's standpoint, but from the standpoint of the people of Libya, now there's going to be retribution. Now there will be vengeance.
Vengeance from who? You're saying from tribal factions?
Yes.
Vengeance against the rebels? Vengeance against
tribal factions who have been injured by the rebels. The tribal leader's son and brother were both killed by the rebels. Imams in Libya were assassinated. Moderate imams who do not support radical Islam were assassinated by the rebels.
That's another question. I think that you and I have spoken about al-Qaeda elements within the rebels. Do you think that that is a faction that exists and will gain influence during this time if Gaddafi does go?
I believe very strongly, and I have believed from the very beginning, that that the NATO rebels are made up of Islamic radicals and al-Qaeda. And even those who are not violent still support the instatement of Sharia. They want women to wear the abaya. For those who don't remember, the abaya is the head covering. They want women to be controlled in marriage contracts. They want to take away a lot of the rights that Gaddafi gave them. We have done something I believe, very stupid. Gaddafi was one of the most advanced leaders on women's rights and Islamic modernism in the whole Arab world, and we've handed it back to the Islamic radicals.
And that's something that so you think that really this is handing it back over to Islamic radicals that will take it in a far worse direction than Gaddafi did?
Oh, their goal is I have read a report put together by the French government that they're like a fact-finding mission for the French government, and their goal is to instate Sharia. They want to take away the modernity of Gaddafi. That is the problem that they had with him.
And a very different commentary that you're giving than what we hear from the President of the United States, who just today at 2 p.m. came out saying that this violent dictator is looking like he's going to go. I want to thank you for your analysis. That was former CIA asset Susan Lindauer.